Oh, thank you so much. Man, I love being here at New Anthem. It's so good to be back. I hear that 11 a.m. service is the rowdiest. That's just what I heard. Is it true? I think so. By the way, I think my favorite thing about New Anthem is it comes equipped with your own sweat towel. So I don't know how much I'll sweat, but I promise at some point I'm going to use it just because it's been gifted to me. So hold me accountable as we do in church, right? Anyways, so glad to be back. As Pastor John said, my name is Drew. I work at Kensington Church. I've been on the staff team there for about 8 years with high school students and now young adults for the past 4, and a part of the teaching team for weekends. And I'm just so blessed to be here. Pastor John and I were really close because we bond over the frustrations of golf. Anybody? A few of us trying to make the PGA Tour. Well, weirdly, last time Pastor John played golf, and I played golf, he shot for the first 9 holes, consistent 6s, which is like biblical, weird number of chaos, right? Like a very kind of evil number. And so I just firmly believe we need to pray over his golf game as Satan is trying to kill, steal, and destroy him away from the PGA Tour. So we just got to pray for him. But no, I love Pastor John. Honestly, everything he's building here has just been so amazing. I love it. I love his heart. It's so pure. In the church, it's so easy to care about all these crazy things in church, like growth and ministry, but he genuinely just cares about what's happening and the culture and loving people. And I've seen that, and I'm just so impressed with him. So I'm just so thankful for his leadership in my life and friendship. So yeah, give it up for Pastor John. Watch it on the stream. Love you. Well, today I am excited because the message I'm sharing really comes from my heart. It comes from my personal journey and story. And today's title is called Unloved, Why You Probably Feel Lonely. See, my guess is if you are married in a relationship, looking to be married, if you have children or you are simply a child and have parents or friends, I think all of us, you can be close in relationship, but still feel an aching and a longing to be loved by somebody else. Like you can have somebody who truly, genuinely loves you, but you don't feel seen, noticed, or understood or heard. And so there's this blockage that happens where we feel unloved. And I want to suggest today that there are 2 dangerous ways and strategies that we all have of trying to feel less lonely and to feel loved that we think may cure our loneliness, but I believe actually increase our loneliness. And I would actually say that a majority of the times when we are in a relationship, let's say we're married. I've actually been married for 5 years to my beautiful wife, Natalie. We have a 1-year-old son. His name is Bronson. The joys of fatherhood, I would describe it as overwhelming delight. I mean, I just absolutely love like joy at every corner, right? But something I've learned and realized is that every fight that you have as a married person is about one thing and one thing only. Every fight is actually about emotional safety and security. Every fight is a protest against the intimacy that you might be losing. Anybody who's married in the house, can I get an amen really quick? Like every fight is simply saying, if I have needs and I bring them to you and I get rejected, I don't know if I can safely trust you to meet my needs or to hear me, see me, or understand me. And so in the process, we put our defenses up, and maybe you're in a marriage or you've been in a relationship, if you're single, again, looking, wherever you are, again, if you're a child and you have parents, where you can just feel this frustration where like you don't know why, you have all this anger, bitterness, resentment, defensiveness in your heart. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that we're all secretly and unknowingly fighting over emotional safety and security. See, I believe that there's a big lie that is told to us when it comes to relationships, all of them, no matter what they are. The biggest lie is that relationships exist to make me happy. And I'm not, this is not one of these messages where it's like, well, too bad, right? No, it's actually showing up to have compassion over the fact that this is a reality, right? Like the biggest lie says that I need to find somebody else so they can supply me with what I'm searching for inside of myself. That it's their job and role to now satisfy me, to make me consistently feel loved, pleased, and adored and admired at every turn. But the reality is that 2 people are doing that. So two people are expecting each other to do to provide that, and in the process, both actually get left out because love and relationships is all about sacrifice and giving and dying for somebody else. Amen? When I was dating my wife, we were experiencing a lot of turmoil in our relationship. Now, we were dating for 3 years before we got engaged, and we had 2 breakups. If you've ever been a part of we've been dating and on and off, you understand mistrust, am I right? Like you get what mistrust feels like when you can't really talk to somebody, you don't know if they're gonna meet you. And so we had just come off of our 2nd breakup because we just couldn't interact, we just couldn't find safety, we just couldn't find trust. So we come back and we had made this decision that if we had come back, we were gonna aim for marriage and really work on our issues to get married. And of course, for me at this point, my love for my girlfriend, now wife, had surpassed a lot of these trust issues and a lot of these hurts and pains. However, it's undeniable that these hurts and pains existed. So as we started dating and progressing towards marriage, and again, if you're married in here, we've all maybe had wandering thoughts in the back of our mind in our worst moments or in our bitterness or after that fight or when we close the door and we shut them out. I began to feel bitter because I felt trapped. And I began to feel like I wondered if I should explore more options, not because I didn't love her or she wasn't enough, but because our mistrust had grown inside of me and hurt me so much. I just wondered, maybe is there a better vibe somewhere else? Is there like a better fit somewhere else? Am I gonna get what I'm searching? Is someone else gonna make me happy? And all of us, again, if you're married, it's like maybe you've wandered here of like, what if I chose the wrong person? I love them and I've built something with them that no one else will give me. However, I still feel the sense where, man, is there a chemistry thing? Are we 2 different people speaking 2 different languages? So in the process, I had this bitterness and this wonder, but I didn't want to pursue anyone else because I did loved my wife dearly, or my girlfriend at the time. And so finally I was so avoidant, I came to a counselor and I said, I am so bitter because I feel like I should explore more options to just really know if this is the right thing. And he said, well, you want to get married, right? And I said, yeah. He says, well, marriage is built off of intimacy and truth-telling, not falsehood and lies and hiding. So if you want to get married and build it on the correct foundation, you need to go home and tell your girlfriend every single thing that you just told me. And I was like, absolutely not. Like, how do you approach somebody telling them something that you feel like might damage them as a person and rattle their identity? See, I feel like oftentimes we're afraid to share our truth even though it's real and accurate and ours. But I took his advice and I went home, and sure, did it cause a lot of fights? Did it create some mistrust? Of course. However, from that experience, what happened with me is it actually cured what I was really looking for. See, I wasn't looking for other options or to receive happiness or to have more brain drugs with somebody new. What I was really looking for was intimacy and safety. So fully being known and showing up to the table was what cured me, instead of choosing to avoid it and just say, oh, well, someone else is gonna fix the wound inside of me. See, I believe that relationships in our life, all of them, parents, coworkers, friendships, spouses, and couples, all of it is centered around the joy of intimacy, because happiness will always try to demand that someone else does something for me. So today maybe you've heard this story about Mary and Martha, but their brother Lazarus dies and they invite Jesus to come heal him, but Jesus is delayed in getting them, so they're getting frustrated and upset with Jesus because if he was there earlier, he could have fixed the problem. And so here's what we see in John chapter 11. It says this: on his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. And many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. And so when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed home. The 2 strategies that we all use when we face difficult pain that we think are going to cure our feelings of being unloved are actually increasing our loneliness. And are you ready? The first one is called distancing. It's the avoidant distancer who doesn't want to have to show up to intimacy. And so in the process, they close the door behind them and they shut off from relationship. The second one is called the anxious pursuer or the obsessive pursuer. The imagery is of two people. One is the anxious pursuer is pounding on the door saying, hey, we have all these issues. Are you going to come outside and figure them out? And the distancer is holding the door shut saying, yeah, I can hear you through them, but I need to protect myself from you. And maybe you need to go figure it out. And here we have the cycle that traps many of us in marriage or even our parents. And so in this story, we see both of these attitudes being displayed, right? Martha went out to meet Jesus and Mary stayed at home. So I'm going to start with Mary, and I don't think she's this distancer in the Bible, but in this example, she represents the distancer, right? So she stays at home when her brother dies and doesn't go out to meet Jesus. So the distancer in a relationship with God is somebody who maybe you used to go to Jesus or in the past, you used to maybe inquire of God when there was major pain, but now that there's been so much death in your life, you've lost so much, it's easier just to believe that you can take care of all your own problems. See, there's somewhere where you learn that you can't depend on God, you can't depend on your spouse, you can't depend on your parents, you can't depend on your friends, you can't trust nobody. And so it's easier for you to just be an island in a fortress where you are perfectly self-sustaining. See, a distancer psychologically, this is called the avoidant attachment style in psychology if you want to look it up. But many times, because they've been hurt or because they don't know how to handle their emotions, they will often build a high view of themselves because they believe they're the only ones who really understand and nobody else does. And then they will create a negative view of the world around them or of their intimate partner because they're the ones who have all these needs and they begin to shame their partner for having those needs. And so they have this positive view of themselves because they can take care of themselves. But secretly, the distancer experiences the emotion of shame. They feel shame because they know that in intimate relationships, they can't show up and be seen and meet somebody else's needs. That there's someone pounding on the door of their life and they're way too afraid to open the door and choose to take care of them. The reason why, because the distancer's greatest fear is that they're going to be overwhelmed by the intensity of intimacy. That there's all these powerful emotions that they don't know how to control. They're living inside of them. That if they showed up, maybe their anger would come out. Maybe their disappointment, their true sadness would appear. And in the process, that would be overwhelming and they wouldn't know how to cope or deal. And so they choose to distance themselves and isolate because that is way too intimidating and scary. However, Martha represents the anxious pursuer who's obsessive. So if you are the anxious pursuer, you're like Martha, where you go to Jesus with a list. You're like, Jesus, you should have been here earlier. You should have come home on time. My brother would not be dead. Is that you feel like by your actions, you will be able to control the outcome and get your needs met. So it's easier to take control or to obsess and to be anxious, not because you want to, but because you feel like it helps you. So there's a lot of compassion here, right? It's the way of coping and understanding what's going on in you. So for Martha, what's so fascinating is other places in the Bible. I mean, do you remember when Jesus showed up at Mary and Martha's home, and Martha was running around trying to make sure the fences were up for the baby gates, and the dog was outside, and he was fed, and she was cleaning up the dishes that piled up for the week. Because once you have kids, you don't really do the dishes if you maybe are a clean person, but probably Martha did take really good care of them. So she's cleaning up the house, and Mary's sitting at the feet of Jesus, and this is the comments where Martha begins to experience anger, where she says, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her to help me. Jesus says, Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. And Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. See, for a pursuer, what happens is we let our obsession prevent genuine connection. We let obsession prevent our genuine connection. We're so worried about the outcome that we need to be responsible for other people because the truth is we're searching for something for ourselves. And so the opposite of the distancer is that the pursuer will have a negative view of themselves. Like they're innately flawed and broken. Like there's something wrong with them. And they have this high view of their partner. Do you see how there can be a trap? They have this negative view of themselves, like they're innately flawed and they're this awesome person if they're just broken. And so, however, they don't maybe experience shame, maybe shame of feeling unloved, but they experience anger because they're bitter that they're not feeling loved. And so they search and claw, and they pound on the door only to be turned away by what feels like maybe even everyone in their life. And this is what begins to happen is this cycle is deadly in a marriage. See, in my life, I'm actually the distancer. And the reason why is because my family were avoidant distancers. My parents divorced when I was 10 years old. And a few weeks after they divorced, my mom had gotten my brother and my sister to pack up into the car. And she was like, hey, like we're going to go see my friend. I'm like, at 1:30 on a Tuesday? She was like, yeah, we'll just talk to my friend. And so we show up and it's our therapist. I'm like, are you kidding me? So we get to the therapist's office and they ask us, hey, how do you feel about your parents getting divorced? I mean, how does that make you feel? My siblings and I did not say one single word for the entire hour. Because in our family, emotions were not something you processed or talked about. And it's strange because I have a twin and we began to grow in our relationship together and we began to reflect on this moment of like, we had no clue how to process what we even felt. We had no language, we had no vocabulary. Like our parents had never investigated to see how we felt about hardly anything in our lives. And so in the process, I show up to marriage, and while I feel a little bit more mature in being able to bring myself to the table, it's when the rubber meets the road and there's intense emotion where someone has a problem with me and I can't just solve it by my charm or my, dashingly good looks. But instead I have to actually maybe be vulnerable and apologize. Or get this, believe that I am in fact the bad guy. See, a distancer, one of their biggest fears is that they're not the biggest fear, one of the biggest realities and things we're afraid to admit to ourselves is that we are the bad guy or the bad girl. Is that we may be the person pulling away, and there's deep shame in that. That we know there's a responsibility on our end that we're afraid to meet and we can't admit it to ourselves. And so we need to inflate our view of self just to believe that it's their problem so that we don't have to face the powerful negative emotion of believing that maybe it's our fault. See, in this story, what I love is that both anxious Martha and avoidant Mary exhibit the corrections and what I believe are the appropriate behaviors for both. Because there is redemption, and I believe that there's restoration for if you feel like you identify as one of these or fall on the spectrum. Because again, I'm not boxing anybody in here. But I do believe there's remedies. See, here's how Martha handles her encounter with Jesus. John chapter 11, Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. And Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. See, anxious Martha chooses to release control to Jesus for the outcome. See, if we're a pursuer in the house, we need to learn to release the control to Jesus, release the control to our partner. We cannot control the outcome. We cannot force somebody to love us. And we have to release and risk, this is going to hurt. We have to risk the anxiety of separating ourselves from connection with somebody else who doesn't want it. We have to learn to risk the anxiety of them, of trying to force them to give us what we are looking for, and choose to independently cope and deal with our own powerful emotions for our own sake. See, Martha, as she shows up to Jesus, she says, Jesus, you should have been there. And she goes, But Jesus, I know that with all things, God can do all things, and all things are possible through you, and I believe that you're a healer. See, many times, here's the thing. I believe it's that attitude of, God, you are able to, but even if you don't, I believe that this is who you are in your character. So it's releasing the outcome and risking the anxiety of separation, where we can find the independence that we were really looking for and hoping for in our lives. That there is a place, not to give a self-love message, but the fact that I believe that God has created all of us to have independence. Do you realize that we're not marionettes? Like, this ain't no NSYNC video from the 2000s. Anybody with a reference? Bye, bye, bye. Okay. And we are not marionettes where God is literally controlling our actions. Instead, God has imputed, big word, He's given us the ability to be sovereign over our lives, to make decisions. Have you ever heard of the law of sowing and reaping? Like, if you sow seed into the ground, you can collect the fruit at harvest. It's like the law of cause and effect. If you don't plant seeds, you will not get fruit. If you plant seeds, you will get fruit. That God has given us the ability to be faithful in our life. And so if as an anxious, maybe feeling obsessive in a relationship, the way you can channel your control is to take control of the only things that you can control, which is your thoughts, attitudes, your effort, and your decisions. That's the only thing. You cannot control another person. So we need to look like Martha and say, Jesus, even in faith, God, I'm going to trust you with the outcome. It may not even be my preferred outcome, but I know that there's something in this for me. I know there's a lesson in this for me. I know there's development in this for me. I know that this is for me in some way. Even if it doesn't feel like it, God, I release the outcome to you. Are you a pursuer? And then Mary's response, who represents this distance or avoidant Mary. It says, when Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, she's weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, she's got some community, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him, he asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied, and Jesus wept. See, avoidant Mary does something I believe us as distancers need to do, and that's to show emotion. It's to show up to the table and be honest about what we really feel. See, Mary was weeping, and she had maybe potentially opened up to a community of Jews who were also weeping with her, or obviously they knew the situation about Lazarus, but either way, there's this communal sense where as a distancer, it's okay to show up and be vulnerable and to do the thing that hurts us, what would feel like be the most intense, hurtful thing for us. See, as a distancer, our fear is that we're going to be overwhelmed by the intensity, and we need to learn to actually step in to the intensity. You know what I've learned too about if you are a pursuer in the house, I have a 1-year-old son, Bronson, and we're teaching him how to eat. Isn't that fun, parents? Teaching kids how to eat when they like the sound of food dropping on the ground, you know? But there was this Instagram post I just saw recently where it talked about how little kids have, big people emotions. And they said about eating, what do we all do? We try to do positive reinforcement when they do things right. But they say sometimes we can emphasize eating time. It's like, ooh, bad sugar. We don't like sugar. Ew, ew, ew. And the kid's like, what if I like sugar? It tastes good. Does that say something about me? Or like, we love veggies. Yay! And it's just like this huge horse and pony show. And so what they say is what you need to do is, as a parent, sometimes you just got to come in with some green beans. You just got to drop them on the plate and then walk away. You just got to play it cool, You just got to drop it and just go, skirt, skirt, okay. It's got to give them some space. See, if you are a pursuer in the house, it's to release the control. It's to play it cool. If you're the distancer, it's to show up and experience the intensity. That's the only way that we can resolve this trap. Because what begins to happen is, if we make it about them changing and not us changing, we've made the goal of relationships our happiness. See, happiness will always demand something that someone else changes. It's an external fix. I'm not the problem. They need to work on themselves. But happiness demands, but intimacy will grow. And intimacy is the goal of relationships. I believe this is the goal. See, here's what also happens. If we stay in this trap there's an article written about this psychologically, is that both attitudes will end up using each other. They'll use each other for what they do not want to have to choose for themselves. Meaning this, if you're a distancer in the house, you are afraid of intimacy, so you find more comfort being with someone who's more anxious or obsessive, because at least they're vulnerable and they're going to initiate conflict and they're going to get their needs met, and it forces you into a place of being loved without you having to choose it for yourself. It's easier for someone to force you into it than for you to have to choose it for yourself. Likewise, if you're the anxious pursuer, we don't feel comfortable choosing to distance ourselves. So it's easier to choose a distancer in our life who will force us into a place of independence than for us to have to choose it for ourselves. See, this is the trap that we can find ourselves in. But I believe that God is interested in restoring and repairing this trap that we find ourselves in. Now, I have to be honest because there is a winner in this fight. The winner is the person who, by their strategy, gets their needs met. And here's the thing. When the avoidant person closes the door behind them, because conflict takes so much intimacy to resolve, and they can just keep avoiding and avoiding and avoiding, usually the distancer ends up winning out in the battle. And the pursuer has to go and mourn and grieve silently without any type of reassurance and love and safety. And so here's what I would offer up as a solution. Now, I don't know if have you ever seen one of these boys? Remember these finger traps? Interesting, right? See, what happens is in conflict, mine kind of broke. But in conflict, a distancer will feel offended or they'll feel overwhelmed by a conflict conversation. So they try to pull out and they're like, no, we need to get out. No, come on. But what that does is, again, over time, the anxious pursuer feels like, no, well, I have to withdraw too. And both people who are thinking they're doing the right thing for each other are now in a bigger trap than when they started. And so what needs to happen is there needs to be a coming together of both people. The distancer needs to show up and experience this intensity, this intense emotion of being vulnerable, and then ultimately both people will get the freedom that they were looking for. That both people will be so secure that they will now not have to worry or get in fights or take jokes the wrong way. See, this is what happens when we choose to love the way that Jesus loved, where Jesus said, I'm going to lay down my life. I'm going to love so low. I'm going to rid myself of my divine privileges. And I'm going to serve. I'm not going to even appear like a king, but I'm here to love and to see you. I'm going to have compassion on you. See, the irony about all of this is that both pursuer and distancer have the exact same fear. It's the fear of intimacy. One person's afraid of not having enough of it. The other person's afraid of having too much of it. And so the irony is that both people will judge each other because we're like, no, well, you don't, at least I don't have what you have because yours is worse than mine when we're both doing it. And so in the process, we need to have compassion for each other, that all of us are doing the best that we can, that all of us come from broken families, that all of us aren't perfect, and that we can love somebody else and have compassion for them the way that Jesus had compassion for us. Come on, does anybody believe in here that we can model the love of Jesus, that we can be compassionate, we can be forgiving, that this is the nature of the God that we serve? 5 days after my son was born, my dad actually went into the hospital, and he was having symptoms of a heart attack, and the widowmaker valve connected to his heart was pretty much clogged, and so they had to put a stent in, and they caught in the symptoms, but he would have died had he not caught it 5 days after my son was born. And one of the most surprising things about being a new dad, because I was a dad of 5 days, was how unbelievably grateful I was for my parents. Like all of their amazing attributes. You know, I think like when you have siblings, it's so easy just to have the conversations about your parents where you're like, well, you know, mom, right? Well, dad's just going to be dad. I mean, you know, he's dad. And I think the thing that was so fascinating to me was, oh my gosh, like my parents had some amazing secure parts of them for all that they may have been afraid of showing up. They had some amazing, beautiful qualities about them that I don't have to try to replicate. See, I don't have to try to be vulnerable. I don't have to try to be vocal and affirming. The reason why is because my dad was vulnerable and vocal and affirming. So I called him in the hospital. I said, Dad, you'll never believe this. And I don't know if I'm going to get, this moment is making me realize that I need to tell you this. But Dad, I never have to worry about what being a good father looks like, because all I have to do is exist as a product of someone who was fathered well. All I have to do is exist as somebody who received vulnerability. All I have to do is exist as somebody who received pride, joy, adoration. See, and I believe the same is true of our Heavenly Father, that we repeat what we see in relationship. So if we go to God and we see a loving God, we're going to repeat love. If we see a forgiving God, we're going to repeat forgiveness. If we see a God who's compassionate, we're going to repeat compassion. See, many of us, we need to show up to God, whether we're a distance or when we're grieving the deaths away from God, and show up to Him, and we will repeat what we see our Heavenly Father do. In every movie and story, there are 4 acts of a character's life. The first act is a character is invited into adventure, but there's this problem that they need to solve. And you kind of get to know the rules of their universe. And then Act 2 comes, where the character tries to solve the problem in every familiar way they know how, in all of their comfort, in all the ways that they're used to, but they're unwilling to do the thing they should do or they know they need to do. And so in the process of not doing the thing they know ought to do, they hurt all of the relationships around them, trying to solve the problem comfortably that won't cost them anything. And then in Act 3, the character accesses their own vulnerability and redeems themselves. And they restore all the relationships that they had lost in light of the new understanding they have of accessing their own vulnerability to do the thing that would repair relationships and solve the problem. And that's Act 4, is the redemption of their life, the redemption of their relationships. Are you in Act 2? Are you trying to solve this trap? Are you trying to solve your loneliness in every comfortable way without having it have to cost you anything? See, I believe that this is actually the story of the gospel. That Jesus actually, in Act 2, he became Act 3, where he did the work. See, man was created in Act 1, and we had this glorious God, and then in Act 2, we fall, and we try to repair the problem with human kings. And in Act 3, it's not our vulnerability, it's God's vulnerability, that he died on a cross and redeemed the world unto himself. It's the greatest story that was ever written. Are you demanding happiness? But will you let intimacy grow and enter Act 3? Father, we come to you knowing that we are broken and that we are trying to solve our world in the most comfortable way. We're trying to do everything that makes sense to us. And God, I ask that we would just realize that you are the author, and that in our vulnerability and in our brokenness and in our ability to choose you, God, we might find life and restoration. God, help us step into the intensity. Help us release the control. Help us communicate effectively and strongly. God, we don't have to be afraid of our feelings, because we can have compassion towards them. We can understand them and just go, God, I did the best I could, and you saw that. You saw I did the best I could. And it's in your forgiveness that we can learn to forgive ourselves. Father, may that be true of our life. In your name, amen.
Hey, thank you so much for checking out New Anthem Church's YouTube channel. It is our heart and our prayer that this message would be encouraging and impactful for you. If you enjoyed this video, we have tons just like it already on our channel, and we would encourage you to hit the subscribe button either down below or right over here. That way you can stay up to date on when we post the messages. Now, if you don't want to wait for them to come out, we do live stream at 11 a.m. every single Sunday on Facebook at My New Anthem Church. Now, here at New Anthem, our vision is so simple. We want to experience Jesus, we want to equip his people, and we want to empower the world. So with that, we want to say we love you and God bless.